My name is Evelyn Carter, I'm 33, and last Saturday I stood on a train platform in Vermont, completely erased from the plans I spent months building. The air was crisp with the smell of pine and distant wood smoke. My fingers curled around a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. I looked out over the tracks where the trees burned gold and crimson, just like I'd imagined when I started planning this anniversary getaway for my parents. 40 years of marriage. I organized everything around their favorite season. I paid for the train tickets, booked a luxury inn near the Berkshires, even arranged a surprise dinner at the same restaurant where they honeymooned. Every detail, down to the wildflower bouquet on their table, was chosen with love. But when I handed the agent my ticket, he frowned. "This one's already been checked in," he said, flipping the scanner toward me. "Checked in, already boarded." I stared at him, then at the train that had just begun to pull away. I didn't understand until my phone buzzed. It was a message from my brother, Luke. "Chloe really wanted to see the fall colors. You hate crowds anyway." It just made sense. Chloe, his girlfriend of 7 months, the one who once borrowed my sweater, then sold it online. She had taken my place, my seat, my moment. And the worst part? No one even thought I needed to be told. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own story, the dependable background character in someone else's spotlight, then maybe you'll understand why this hurt the way it did. I didn't always feel invisible, but I learned early on that being the one people could rely on meant learning how to disappear quietly. Growing up, I was the kid who set the table without being asked, who finished her homework before dinner, who remembered to feed the dog even when no one else did. I wasn't loud or needy. I was dependable. That's what my mom, Deborah, used to call me, her steady girl. And I wore that title like a medal, even when it felt more like a chain. My younger brother Luke, on the other hand, was the dreamer, the wanderer, the one who needed time to figure things out. He flunked geometry twice, crashed my dad's car before he was even legal to drive, and somehow still managed to be the golden child. When he got a C+ in college algebra, Mom baked a cake. "He's really trying," she said, eyes misty. When I graduated summa cum laude, she smiled and told me not to let it go to my head. At 16, when my dad lost his job, I picked up a part-time waitressing gig and handed over every paycheck without hesitation. I didn't ask where the money went. I didn't complain when Luke kept ordering takeout or forgetting to pay his share of the bills. When he moved out and couldn't make rent, I co-signed his lease. When he dropped out of school, I helped him polish his resume. When that failed, he moved into my guest room. Again. Every time he left, he took something with him. A blanket, my charger, my peace. But I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing. That's what good daughters do, right? You keep the peace. You pick up the slack. You let it go. What no one told me was that being reliable eventually stops looking like love and starts looking like obligation. It becomes your role, not your choice. And the more I gave, the more they assumed I'd always say yes. Not because they were grateful, but because they had forgotten how to even ask. I didn't realize it then, but that train platform wasn't the first time I'd been left behind. It was just the first time I saw it for what it really was. And once you see clearly, you can't unsee it. It started with a note in the corner of my planner. Berkshires, October. Just a scribble, barely more than a passing thought. But when Mom mentioned over coffee how she and Dad had honeymooned in a tiny inn near Lenox, creaky floors, maple syrup by the window, leaves like fire outside, I saw the way her face lit up. So I circled the date, started researching that afternoon. Within a week, I had it all mapped out. A scenic train ride through New England's fall foliage, a 2-night stay at a historic bed and breakfast with fireplace suites, dinner at the same restaurant they visited 40 years ago, still open, still cozy. I even asked the florist to include goldenrod and asters, the same flowers from their wedding photo. It wasn't about proving anything. I didn't need their approval anymore. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted them to see me. Not as the background support, but as someone who still remembered, who still cared. I booked a modest roadside motel room for myself and took coach class on the train. No fuss. I wasn't trying to insert myself into the spotlight. I just wanted to be included in the light. The entire trip came out to just under $9,000. I didn't blink. I made good money. I arranged my calendar around it, squeezed client meetings, shifted deadlines, burned PTO just to make it happen. Luke wasn't part of the plan. Mom had mentioned he might be too busy, working on a creative project, which usually meant Chloe filming TikToks in their kitchen while he played video games in the background. I didn't ask questions. I honestly imagined this trip as something quiet, peaceful. A chance to give them something they hadn't had in years: rest, reflection, and time. A week before we were set to leave, I got a message from Mom. Chloe says her fall content would look amazing up there. Luke thinks it'd be fun if they came too. Is that okay? No mention of costs, no discussion of where they'd sleep or how they'd get there. Just the assumption. You'll make it work. You always do. That night I checked the reservation system. The inn was almost fully booked, but I found one small room nearby, overpriced and inconvenient, but I booked it anyway. I even called the train company to confirm our original seats and asked if we could squeeze 2 more in. I didn't get a thank you, not even a reply. A few days later, Chloe posted an Instagram story, a pair of leather boots resting on my living room floor. The caption? "Can't wait for our fall adventures." She hadn't even asked. Something shifted then, quietly. A tightening in my chest that I ignored, just like I always did. Because if I stopped to acknowledge how wrong it felt, I was afraid I'd never be able to smile through it again. I stayed on that platform long after the train had disappeared around the BE. The sky was veiled in soft gray mist, and the maple trees swayed gently, indifferent to the hollow ache settling in my chest. My suitcase sat next to me, untouched, pointless. The cup of coffee I once held like a comfort was now just weight in my hand. No one called, no one texted again. Not Luke, not Chloe, not even my mother. There wasn't a mix-up, there wasn't an apology. There was just absence. I walked to the small cafe across from the station and sat by the window, ordered another cup I didn't drink. I stared at the buses pulling in, strangers heading to places they had planned with people who wanted them there. I opened Instagram, and there it was. A photo Luke had posted, Mom, Dad, and Chloe standing arm in arm on the same train platform I had just been left behind on. They were smiling. The caption read, "Family fall getaway making memories that last." The word family hit harder than I expected. It felt deliberate, like I had been edited out of the story, not by accident, but by design. I didn't like the photo, didn't comment. I just locked my phone and stared at the wood grain of the table, tracing the scratches with my fingers as if they could explain what I had done wrong. But I hadn't done anything wrong. I had been the planner, the provider, the one who remembered every little thing. And somehow still, I was the one they forgot. No, not forgot. Erased. They had the trip I built, the dinner I arranged, the scenery I dreamed up for them, and they didn't even think to tell me I wasn't needed. Chloe had taken my seat. At the table, in the photo, in the family, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even send a message. Instead, I made a choice. I pulled out my phone again, this time to open my Maps app, and typed in the name of a town I barely remembered from a work trip years ago, Brattleboro. Small, quiet, tucked between pine-covered hills and silver lakes. I didn't book a room in advance. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just picked up my bag, walked to the rental counter, and drove. Because if I had stayed there any longer, waiting for someone to remember me, I think I would have disappeared completely. And I was done being the ghost in my own life. The drive to Brattleboro was quiet. No music, no podcasts, just the steady hum of tires on wet pavement and the whisper of leaves falling across the road like they too were ready to let go. I didn't have a plan, just a memory of a town I once passed through during a conference detour, a place that smelled like pine and cider, where the street lamps glowed amber even at noon. When I pulled into the first roadside inn I found, the clerk didn't ask questions. I didn't offer any. The room was simple, a fireplace, a window that looked out onto a gravel path lined with sugar maples, and a quilt that smelled faintly of wood smoke. I didn't unpack, I didn't check my phone. For 2 whole days, I let the silence wrap around me like something earned. I wandered antique shops filled with forgotten trinkets. I walked through apple orchards shedding their last red leaves, past old barns and weathered fences. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to explain anything. I didn't have to soften my voice or shrink my feelings. I didn't have to make space for someone else's crisis or needs or ego. I just existed. There were a few texts. One from Luke. "Did you get the train schedule wrong?" No apology. Just another casual shrug, veiled as concern. I left it unread. Nothing from my mother, no missed calls, no "where are you?" Just absence dressed in silence. I bought a postcard in a little shop off Main Street. It had a watercolor painting of the town center in autumn, a church steeple nestled among orange trees. I thought about writing a message and mailing it to myself, something poetic, maybe even defiant. But in the end, I folded it into a book and forgot it was there, because I wasn't ready to make a statement. I was still learning to breathe without apology. Each night I sat by the window in that quiet little room, blanket over my lap, tea I never finished in hand, and watched the light fade behind the trees. And slowly, something shifted. Not all at once, not with anger, just a quiet knowing. This wasn't about the train. This wasn't even about Chloe. It was about me. Finally seeing the shape of my own absence, the space I had carved out in everyone else's life without ever being truly invited into theirs. And when I left that town 2 days later, I carried no souvenirs, just clarity. I wasn't going back to who I was before, because once you've tasted your own peace, you stop mistaking being needed for being loved. I got back to my apartment late Tuesday afternoon. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of overcast that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. I set my suitcase down by the door and didn't bother unpacking. There was nothing inside I needed anymore. Out of habit, I opened Facebook, and there it was. An album posted by Mom. Fall memories, anniversary trip. 27 photos, carefully curated, smiles at every stop. Chloe's arm around my mother, my father raising a glass at the inn I booked, the dinner table I had reserved, candles lit, wildflowers in the center. The same wildflowers I had ordered weeks ago. And in the seat meant for me? Chloe. She even used the handwritten place card I'd made. The caption read, "So grateful for our children who made this weekend unforgettable. We couldn't have asked for more love." They hadn't just left me out. They rewrote the story without me. I closed the app. My hands didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. But inside me, something settled, like a door finally closing. The next morning, I drove to the house. My house. The one I bought 6 years ago with my name on every page of the mortgage. The one I had let them live in, rent-free, month after month, because it felt like the right thing to do. Because I thought that's what love looked like. They weren't home. The kitchen smelled different, unfamiliar. Someone else's cooking, someone else's choices. Chloe's raincoat was draped over the stair banister like she belonged there, and in that moment, it became painfully clear. They weren't renters, they were takers, and I was done offering. That afternoon, I drafted the lease adjustment notice. 2 printed copies, one for the kitchen counter, one sent certified by mail. No sharp words. No bitterness, just facts, effective immediately. Rent due at market rate, utilities no longer included, guest privileges revoked unless approved in writing. Deadline, the 1st of the month. I didn't leave a note, because I didn't owe them one. Later that evening, my phone rang. Mom. She didn't greet me, just went straight to, "What is this? You're charging us rent now?" Her voice wasn't confused, it was offended. "This is cruel, Evelyn. We're your parents." I waited a beat, then answered calmly. "Then maybe you should have treated me like your daughter." She scoffed. "So this is about that trip?" I didn't respond. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she added. "It just happened." No apology, Just deflection. Your father's upset. But Dad hadn't called, hadn't texted. I didn't even know if he knew or cared. You could have just talked to us, she said. I exhaled slowly. I could have, but I chose this instead. You're not serious. I am. You have until the first. She hung up. I stood at my kitchen sink staring at the faucet, not angry, not sad, just steady. That house had once felt like love. Now it was a boundary. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. Thick, cream-colored. From a local law office I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Intent to dispute ownership." Inside was a letter, scanned, cold, impersonal. My parents, through counsel, were asserting shared interest in my home. They claimed long-term contributions and occupancy history. No numbers, no documents, just vague legal phrasing and empty confidence. I stared at it for a moment, blinking once, then scanned the whole thing to my attorney. He called within the hour. "This is noise," he said. "They've got no legal standing, nothing to worry about." But it wasn't just noise. It was confirmation. They weren't sorry. They were retaliating. I had drawn a line, and instead of stepping back, they were trying to bulldoze through it. Not with honesty, not with conversation, but with legal intimidation. I didn't cry, but something in me hardened. That night I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from clarity. This was never about misunderstanding. It was about control. They weren't fighting for me. They were fighting for access to what I gave them. They wanted the roof, the space, the security, but not the relationship that came with it. And deep down, I think they always knew this day would come. They just never imagined I'd be the one to walk away first. The next evening, Luke showed up. He looked different, like life had finally caught up to him. His hair was unwashed, his eyes were rimmed red. He stood on my porch like a man who had run out of backup plans. "Chloe left," he said she didn't sign up for all this family drama. He didn't ask to come in, just stood there, waiting. "I don't have anywhere to go. You know that, right?" I did. But I also knew what would happen next if I let him in. The late nights, the unpaid bills, the forgotten promises, the slow return of that heavy silence. So I looked him in the eye and said simply, "I'm not your safety net anymore." He nodded once, eyes glassy, but dry. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he murmured. But even then, he never said sorry. And I didn't say anything at all, because there comes a moment when silence is no longer surrender. It's a decision. Dad never called. Not after the rent notice, not after the legal letter, not even after Luke showed up at my door with nowhere else to go. He didn't yell, he didn't text, he didn't ask why, but then again, he never really did. Growing up, his silence had always been a kind of backdrop, soft and familiar, like static on an old radio. When Mom pushed too hard, when Luke broke things, when I quietly fell apart from holding it all together, Dad just disappeared into the next room. He wasn't cruel. He didn't raise his voice. But he never once stood between me and the weight I wasn't meant to carry. When Mom used guilt instead of gratitude, he looked away. When Luke came asking for more, again, he let me answer. He'd sip his coffee, nod occasionally, sometimes offer a distracted, "She means well," and I used to mistake that for peacekeeping, for kindness. But now I see it clearly. It wasn't gentleness, it was permission. Every time he stayed silent, he gave Mom and Luke the green light. Every time he walked out of the room, he was saying, "This isn't my problem." And every time I cried alone in my bedroom, too tired to fight, he let it happen. The day I dropped off the certified notice at the house, he was out front watering the bushes. The same rose bushes I planted 3 years ago, when I thought home was something we could still build together. He looked up as I stepped out of the car, the envelope in my hand. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. It was the only thing he had said to me in weeks. I met his eyes. "I do." He didn't argue, Just turned the hose back to the roses and went on watering like I hadn't said anything at all. As if choosing myself was rude, as if drawing a boundary was more offensive than a decade of being used. And that's when I understood. Silence doesn't make someone innocent. It makes them comfortable. It makes them complicit. All these years I thought he just didn't know. But he did. He saw it all. And he let it happen anyway. 3 weeks later, I moved out. It wasn't dramatic. No slamming doors, no shouting, no last-minute confrontations. Just me. And a small loft across the river. The place was nothing fancy, exposed brick, tall windows that let in more light than I expected. A little too quiet at first, but the kind of quiet that lets you breathe, not the kind that makes you feel alone. I bought a second-hand couch with a worn-in corner and a real tea kettle that whistled when it was ready. I hung up fairy lights over the window and bought a lamp I actually liked, not one that matched someone else's aesthetic, not something chosen to impress guests, just mine. The air still smelled like paint and dust. I opened the windows anyway. I wanted the space to know me, and I wanted to know it. This new version of stillness, of unshared space. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for my phone to buzz. No group chats asking for favors, no guilt-laced messages about bills or birthdays, no subtle demands framed as, just one more thing. The silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like permission. I slept through the night without checking for missed calls. I ate when I was hungry, not when someone else needed a meal. I listened to music I hadn't played in years, songs that didn't remind me of anyone but me. Luke never texted again. Chloe deleted all her photos, unfollowed everyone, disappeared from our lives like she was never there. And my parents? They went quiet, too. There was one final message from Mom. No greeting, no emotion, just words typed like a statement. "We miss who you used to be." I stared at it for a long moment before replying. "You miss the version of me who never said no. She's gone." There was no response after that. Sometimes I walk past the park near the train station, the same bench where I stood that morning, coffee in hand, watching my family pull away without me. I don't relive it anymore. I don't ache. I just sit for a few minutes and listen to the wind in the trees, the buses idling, strangers laughing nearby. Because now, that moment is no longer my anchor. It's just part of the map that led me here. And this quiet, slow, ordinary life is not lonely. It's mine. I water the little plant by my window. I read in the evenings. I write on blank pages that don't need approval. There's a sticky note on my bathroom mirror with 5 words I wrote after the move. I owe myself the most, and every morning I read it like a promise, not a declaration of war, not a rejection of family, but a reminder. The version of me that gives everything away doesn't live here anymore. Last week, I booked a train ticket to Maine. No group chat, no anniversary dinner to organize, no hotel upgrades or carefully curated flower arrangements. Just me, a window seat, and a quiet town with a bookstore I've always wanted to visit. I didn't ask anyone if it was okay, didn't check calendars or ask if anyone wanted to come. I packed light. A worn sweater that still smells faintly of cedar, a notebook with soft pages, and a heart that finally beats without needing someone else's permission. The morning of the trip, I arrived early to the station. Same rails, same waiting platform, same cool Vermont air. But something was different. Me. I paused before boarding. Just for a second. Let myself remember that other morning. The one where I stood in the same place, holding a ticket to a trip I wasn't invited on. Back then, I thought the pain would last forever. That being left behind would define me, that maybe I really wasn't enough. But the sting is gone now, and all that remains is clarity. I am not their fixer, not their fallback, not their foundation. I am not their plan B. I am my own beginning, and that's something no one can take from me. So I stepped onto the train, found my seat by the window, no one beside me, and for once it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. There are no photos from that trip yet, no captions, no place cards, but there is peace, and peace, I've learned, is a kind of arrival too. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever given your all and still felt invisible, then maybe you understand what it means to finally say enough. And if you do, you're not alone. Let me know in the comments. Was there a moment you finally chose yourself? Your words might be the light someone else needs, and if Evelyn's journey spoke to you, if you want more stories that don't just end, but free, then I hope you'll stay. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter too, because sometimes all it takes is one quiet yes to yourself, and from that, a whole new life begins.